Great. So glad that all of you are here. We are going to be going over the 2021 Seattle Participatory Budgeting Administration and Consulting Services RFP. This is one of 3 info sessions, the first one, in fact, and let's just get into it. So I already introduced myself, mano, he, him pronouns, and I'm going to be one of the main people interfacing with other people applying for the RFP, submitting applications. We also have John, John Page, who will be leading this division and this process. With me, and Jackie, who is going to be offering some technical assistance. So today I'll go over a little bit about what we'll talk about today in the next slide, but it's just going to be a general overview of what the RFP is and what we want to offer, an ability for people to answer or ask any questions that they might have. Later this week on Thursday, from 5 to 7, we'll have the Black Brilliance Research Project report. The folks that put that report together, to talk a little bit about what they did and why they did it and how they came up with this process, because our participatory budgeting process is really based off of the BBRP report. And then on December 14th, we'll have a final info session, mostly to talk about the budget and making sure that any other questions people might have are fully answered. So don't hesitate to ask any clarifying questions if I mumble, if you can't hear me, but if you can write down any larger questions or any more complicated questions, we'll try to save some time at the end so that those questions can be answered. And I'll also have my email and other contact information if you feel more comfortable answering or having your question answered offline. All right, so this is what we'll be talking about. It's essentially what the RFP is. We'll go over the introduction and the timeline that we have. We'll talk about eligibility requirements, again, talk about the Black Brilliance Research Project report. We're just going to touch on it so that folks have a little context on it. We're going to share a little bit about what we expect for the scope of work, the proposal instructions, the application itself, and like I said, we'll have some time for a Q&A. But generally speaking, we're here because the Seattle Office for Civil Rights, SOCR, is searching for an organization or coalition to run a participatory budgeting process program that will allocate about $28 million, partly from the Seattle Police Department budget, to communities impacted by police violence. So the PB program is being created in the context of the city's investment for upstream community safety and development efforts, with a particular emphasis on repairing harms from systemic lack of investment in the city's historically underserved Black communities. With SOCR support, the consultants, whoever we hire for this job, will design and run the PB process itself, and be in alignment with the spirit and vision of the Black Brilliance Research Project report. So we have a few main goals for this program: to directly invest in Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities, BIPOC, consistent with applicable law, because we are the city. And 2, to increase the ownership and participation of city residents in solutions to the city's pressing needs. And I see this as sort of a bottom-up approach. The consultants should the consultant's proposal should address both the technical needs of setting up and administrating a PB process on behalf of SOCR, as well as engaging with communities that are at the center of the Black Lives Matter and defunding the police conversations. I was just wondering, are we recording? Okay, great. So let's go over the timeline a little bit. Right now, or rather late last week, we released the RFP on Thursday, and hopefully most of you have seen it and are sharing it around with your contacts. Today, we're doing the first of 3 info sessions. And tomorrow, or rather Thursday, we'll talk a little bit, we'll have folks from Black Brilliance Research Project report out on what their report talked about. It's a thick, very, very heavy report. And then we'll have an info session that talks a little bit about frequently asked questions, but particularly about the budget. Our deadline for applications is Wednesday, January 5th at 11:59 p.m. But you can ask questions up until 5 p.m. that day. Well, because yeah, we'll try to answer as much as we can, but that's what we'll be able to do. After convening a rating panel, we'll hopefully be able to set up some interviews by late January and early February for folks who are finalists. And then February 2022 is when we expect to do notifications of announcement of award with an expected execution of contract around April 2022. All of these dates, most of these dates I think are pretty firm, but you know, they can be tentative. So please pay attention to our website and check to see if anything shifts and changes, because I think that's just how things happen during the pandemic. And if I'm going too fast, don't hesitate to tell me to slow down or to shift. So let's talk about eligibility. So applicants must follow non-discrimination and equal opportunity provisions mandated by federal, state, and city laws. Applicants that are incorporated must be in good standing and meet all licensing requirements applicable to its organization, e.g. Washington State Business License, Seattle Business License, 501c3. If your organization is not incorporated, you can still apply with a fiscal sponsor that is incorporated. Applicants must have a federal ID number, employee identification number to facilitate payments with the city of Seattle to the organization or coalition. So anyone who meets these minimum eligibility requirements may apply. This includes, but is not limited to, community-based organizations, coalitions, or grassroots organizations. We are open to a lot of different kinds of groups that are able to apply to this. I also want to bring note to our vaccination requirements because it might be an issue for some applying organizations. All applicants must show compliance with the following vaccination requirements. So as of December 5th, 2021, the Mayor's Executive Order vaccination requirements for city contractors, and I'll just read this. The applicant, by submitting its proposal, agrees that it will comply with the Mayor's Executive Order 2021-08 regarding COVID-19 vaccination requirements, and that it will require its workers, service providers, subcontractors, suppliers, and their workers to comply as well if their work involves being on-site or in person. Furthermore, the applicant shall submit the city provided vaccination attestation form, which is linked in the RFP and also in this slide, no later than 5 days prior to the start of the work. During the performance of the work, consultants shall provide an updated vaccine attestation form upon the city's request. Yeah, we just want to make sure that anybody who is, engaging in this work and bringing other people into this work is vaccinated. I'm not the expert in talking about the Black Brilliance Research Project, but I just wanted to give a little bit of context of what it was. In May 2020, the murder of George Floyd by Minneapolis police officers sparked nationwide protests with calls to defund the police and justice for Black victims of police violence. This horrific and public tragedy forced people to confront the racism, oppression, and white supremacy of the system that our government foundations are built upon, and the role of the city of Seattle has in reputation, institutional racism, and violence. These calls led not only to acknowledge, but divesting from systemic harm done to Black communities, and resulted in numerous proposals coming from Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities, groups like Decriminalize Seattle and King County Equity Now that supported the strategy of divesting funding from Seattle Police Department and reinvesting those funds for housing, education, healthcare, directly back into community. This work is built upon decades of organizing in defense of Black lives and in support of Black liberation. So this research acknowledges that this is I think the city started to pay attention after the murders of last summer of 2020, but this work has been going on for generations and for years. So for a little bit more context, on September 22nd, 2020, the city budget amendment directed $3 million to commit community-based research group to evaluate the process needed to promote a reimagined public safety. From this was born the participatory budgeting process through a report by the Black Brilliance Research Project, BBRP, which was submitted earlier this year in February 2021. So they highlighted 5 priority investment areas. Housing and physical spaces, mental health, youth and children, economic development, and crisis and wellness. The way that we've been talking about it in the office is that this can look a lot of different ways and doesn't have to fit a strict definition, but are really good guidelines for how to move these resources. So the scope of work. So the critical elements of this roadmap include, but are not limited to these, developing and implementing of a steering committee that represents the marginalized and underrepresented communities and creates rules and a community engagement plan, a plan to prepare those communities for the participatory budget program to ensure diverse participation that empowers communities and increases civic engagement. Gathering information on how racism has affected residents of Seattle. The design and implementation of a community-led PB program fueled by multiple community organizations and community members. And lastly, the community-led PB program will follow the spirit and vision of the BBRP recommendations. So that is the investment strategy. Let's talk about the consultant tasks. We want, the expectation is that the consultant will establish the establishment and implementation of a participatory budgeting process that aligns with recognized best practices and has fidelity to the spirit and vision set forth by the Black Brilliance Research Project report. And of course, this is also always in tension with the entity of the city as a government organization, in that we have legal requirements, and some of the things that we do have to be feasible. And there are, I think JP and I will work on the other aspects of making sure that those things aren't too big of a barrier for folks, but it is a reality. We also expect the consultant to maximize feasible participation of historically and currently marginalized community members, and oversee a process that results in the selection of actionable projects for recommendations to the city, which can be implemented late in 2022 or early 2023. So let's talk about priority applicants. We want these applicants to demonstrate a capacity and experience to conduct a city-wide PB program with actionable recommendations for the city to make decisions resulting in community investments, a strong connection to communities historically and currently impacted by police violence, including the Black community, sustained commitment to work with and for historically and currently marginalized communities, and in collaboration with local organizations, coalitions led by Black, Indigenous, and communities of color, in building power and local capacity for this citywide PB program, uplifting BIPOC, queer, transgender leadership in building solidarity. A commitment to address internalized oppression, affirming all identities and values, ending all forms of oppression, which includes racism, sexism, ableism, homophobia, transphobia, and misogyny. Yeah. We encourage joint applicants, applications for and collaborations between organizations and coalitions. We are prioritizing applications that show, what these following aspects. So, but the idea is that maybe not one organization has everything, and it might be useful for some organizations to apply collaboratively. So, proposal and instructions. Like I said, and I'll repeat again, the application packets are due by Wednesday, January 5th, 2022 at 11:59 p.m. Please submit them to me, Manu. My email is emmanuel.desilva@seattle.gov. And unfortunately, we can't consider applications that come in after the due date. If you have questions up until January 5th at 5 p.m., please don't hesitate to email me or ask any questions. I am the representative of and spokesperson of SOCR's work on this. And I'm available. And in the last slide, I'll also share my work cell phone number if it's easier for folks to do that. We would be remiss to say that any communication that you have with us, with me or any other city person, is subject to the Public Records Act. So the City of Seattle is subject to Washington State Public Records Act. Under the Act, documents and records received by the City of Seattle, including material submitted in response to this RFP, is considered public records. The Act requires that public records must be promptly disclosed by the city upon request unless there is a specific exemption that applies. So if you don't want the public to know it, don't share it with us or email it to me. So, application. Let's talk a little bit about the proposal content. One rather, will ask for a letter of interest. It's just an introductory letter of interest signed by the applicant and may contain relevant information about the firm and executive summary or overview of the proposal. The letter should be no more than 2 pages. The letter should also identify a single point of contact and their contact information for all communications related to the application. Even if you're a coalition, it's just easier to maybe make sure we know who to reach out to if we have any questions. The body of the proposal should address the evaluation criteria required in section 3, which is going to be in later slides, in accordance with the scope of work, and shall be no more than 10 pages. The proposal timeline should include anticipated dates of major project milestones, and that is not included in the 10-page limit. The price proposal, applicant should provide a price proposal for completion of this proposal. This price proposal should include budget overview and summary. It's not part of the 10-page limit, and we'll show you a little budget sheet that should help with filling that out. And if there's anything in chat, please let me know.
You're good. No, you're good. You want to check in with folk, but you're good.
Yeah. Before we go to evaluation criteria, are there any questions?
You just want me to come off mute, start talking?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. My only question was where you spoke to capacity and experience. Is now the time in which you could expound on that, or is that for the session on December 14th?
Sorry, the question about?
Just where it says those who are applying, I guess, what does capacity and experience look like in terms of, who would be applying? Are you looking for somebody with 10 years and somebody who's, experienced with governmental budgeting, or is it somebody who experienced more so with the community organizing side? Just wondering what that definition looks like.
Yeah. I think it's going to look like a lot of different, like all of those different aspects, as long as, and which is why we suspected that it might make sense for organizations or groups to apply as coalitions. I think that a good applicant will probably have participatory budgeting experience, which will touch on all of those aspects, and is very specific kind of work that isn't just being able to run a large project. It's anticipating concerns and meeting those, and we just some of the concerns that we have, and JP, you can talk a little bit about this, is we don't want people to try to build something new when there's already good lessons learned out there, and maybe to connect with folks who already know how to do good community organizing and engagement in that kind of way.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add, Manu, Michelle, that's a great question. The only thing I'll add is when we think about capacity. So even if there is an applicant who has a lot of experience doing a PB process, participatory budgeting process, do they have the capacity? Or are they doing simultaneous processes in other parts of the country or other places? And do they have the capacity to fully weigh in on this? It's a great question, though.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you, guys.
All right, yeah, thank you. So, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the evaluation criteria too. So we want an organization coalition overview. So describe your mission, history, major accomplishments, how it has supported development, community leadership, and empowerment through civic engagement. Describe how your organization is accountable to communities most impacted by racism. Proposals may provide links to websites. The websites are not included in that 10-page limit, though. You know, in your project proposal, we should include how you will implement participatory budgeting process with fidelity to the spirit and vision of the Black Brilliance Research Project PB roadmap, and any areas in which you may elect different strategies. So having a good knowledge of what the Black Brilliance Research Project report it would be really useful for applicants in your project proposal. And I'll just go back a couple of times. So these criteria are weighted differently. The organization coalition overview is 10 points. The project proposal out of 100. The project proposal is 20 out of 100. And then connection to local communities is also 20 over 100. And here's where we want folks to describe ways in which your organization has built power in local communities and strategies you will use to stay accountable to communities historically impacted by police violence throughout this process. We also expect a description describe sustained and continued commitment to work in collaboration with local organizations, coalitions, including those led by Black, Indigenous, and communities of color, and other marginalized and oppressed communities, uplifting BIPOC, queer, transgender leadership to build solidarity through BIPOC communities. And again, this is really making sure that we're not just lifting up certain voices, but we're really getting folks who are most directly impacted. And describe you know, we expect a commitment to building power in the communities historically marginalized and underserved through a participatory budgeting process. Experience is very important to us. We've weighted that at 40 points. So here, describe experience implementing a participatory budgeting or a similar process of comparable scope and breadth. What are some ways you've implemented a PB that would be applicable to the Seattle context? Provide demographic information of communities you've engaged with during a PB process. Describe past collaborations with government entities you've worked with. What were the decision-making processes to get you to a final vote process? And it's also important for us to know what lessons you've learned and what challenges you overcame in past processes so that it speaks to your experience. And lastly, we have the budget, which is weighted at 10 points, but still pretty important. It's important for us to have a description of your proposal will and how it will be implemented within the timeline proposed within proposed budget. We are also asking that you include an attachment template with a program budget and narrative. And the next slide will show that a little bit, including in the budget narrative sheet that supports items in the budget sheet. So essentially everything that you're saying you're spending, you're rationalizing. It's in the narrative somewhere. This is what we're offering as maybe a cheat sheet if you need it for folks applying for this. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but feel free to add in any other budgetary items that you might have, expenses that you might have here under budget expenses. We are offering an indirect cost of 15%. So because we're asking for, a proposed budget, we're not asking we're not asking for a price limit. We just want to make sure that whatever you're proposing makes the most amount of sense, because all of these resources will be coming from the $28 million of the money that has been allocated for the participatory budgeting process. And in this sheet, this is just another tab in the same sheet. We're just asking folks to do the same thing, list the same budget items that you had. These are specific PB stages that we recognize likely happen, but please describe the number of them. For instance, the number of staff and kind of staff you'll have, rate of pay, and how many hours. And it might be helpful for us to also see the total in this cell, just so that we understand exactly if you say a certain number, how that number breaks down specifically. And that includes with travel expenses, supplies, any other budgetary item that you have. We just want to specifically understand how all of that is being broken down to, and so that we can compare a little bit easier between applications. Great. I know we said we'd be here for 2 hours, but I think we finished a little early. And I want to open it up to some questions. I'm going to stop sharing, but then I'll share my screen again. Yes, Francesco.
Thanks. What's the ideal ratio if $28 million for the pot and for running the process? What ratio are you looking for, or would be most favorable?
Ratio for how much you can apply for.
Yeah, I mean, if 28 million is one, I guess this is two questions. One, should the pot amount be included in the proposal so that it totals out to 28 million? Or is the pot amount separate in the proposal, just how much of the 28 million it would cost to run the process? That's one question. And the second question is, what's the ratio of the 28 million being used for PB versus used to run PB? That is ideal.
Yeah, I think the 28 million is separate. And that's how I've always thought of it. And it's not part of the budgeting process. That will be like the allocated amount, whatever it will ultimately be, is separate from what I understand. JP, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand. So to run the process will come out of the $28 million, And Francesco, there's not a set ratio. I hear what you're asking. And so one of the reasons Manu talked about really laying out this budget, being mindful that it's coming out of the $28 million, because running the process is part of participatory budgeting, right? So it's not a set aside. So does that answer your question? It's one pot of money, but we don't have a fixed idea of how much of that pot. Is that what you're asking? If we had a fixed
exactly
idea?
what I'm asking, and I appreciate the answer, and also what I'm hearing of like the running it is also the process. I like that attitude.
Yeah, we don't have a fixed idea, Francesca. That's a great question. And y'all, real quickly, so I'm fielding all the questions. We're taking notes. I think Jackie is taking notes. And we're going to post these questions on the website as well under frequently asked questions. So, if y'all are not taking notes, we appreciate the question. Keep them coming.
And I'm sure there's a hand raising function here that I'm not seeing. I don't know what. But my other question was, with the second tab of the budget, you explained where you wanted us to kind of break it down to say, we would like the personnel would be one person at, $20 an hour, for this many hours a week. Do you have or will you have an example that kind of breaks that down a little bit more? Not trying to be a perfectionist, but just also don't want to waste anybody's time submitting something that's not right.
Yes, we do have that ready. Well, I don't know if it's ready, but is it okay if I share my screen again, JP, with apologies. I wasn't going to share this just yet, but let me pull it up. But yes, we will have something that breaks that down a little bit more. And then if you have any questions, don't hesitate to submit something or to share something with me, and I can, we can answer those questions.
Okay.
We want to make that, we want to help you out in this process.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Apologies, I don't have it up just yet. I realized I closed it out.
You're fine. As long as if I know something is coming, just, if you guys are going to post it to the website, we'll keep checking. If not, and I don't see it,
you want me to share?
So I'll reach out.
Oh, you got it, JP?
I'm sorry. I think I have it. Let me see. I worked the mess out of my computer. So actually, I closed it. Let me see if I can find it. Are there any other questions? Jackie, can you take over note-taking function while I look for this?
Yeah, and JP, just a note, we actually have the live transcription saving everything as well. If anyone has for example, in the live transcript on the bottom right, there's actually a full transcript you can access to save you some time as well. Just a heads up. But sorry for interrupting.
No, you're great, Jackie. Thanks for that reminder. These millennials. Darn it. I'm hating a little bit, Michelle. I can hate with Jackie. I think Jackie is used to me. Here we go. So I'm going to share real quickly, Mano, and you take over, okay?
That's good.
Cool.
So if you double click on JP, if you want to double click on cell B9. This is kind of the ideas. So for instance, we'll ask for one project lead at $60 an hour and an estimated, number of hours over 2 months. And so that we can make the calculations on our own. And then 2 community organizers at $40 an hour and estimated 160 hours, for the 2-month period, and keep on going below so that we can kind of understand what those numbers are or would be for each of the cells. So whatever that equals out in, say, B9 in that tab should also be the same number that we see in the corresponding. It's B10 here, but yeah, it should be the same.
Okay, that really helps. Thank you for showing that. That makes complete sense.
I got another question. I just want to verify, this one's a little quick. The $28 million it's not determined to be capital or operating, or it is operating funds. So the flexibility of what that money could be used for, what communities prioritize, is more flexible than just brick and mortar construction projects, which is what we usually see in most PB processes. Is that right?
I think so. Yeah, that's how I understand it, JP.
Absolutely, because capital would eat it up. We just had this conversation, Manu. Absolutely, right? It's going to be a struggle, right? Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, Francesca. We have a PB process here, and it's not really it's not capital, but it's like improving parks and roads, right? Some of the roads, some of the streets happening in various communities. No, yeah, it's I don't know. We think if the Black Regions Research Project, they don't really, the 5 focus areas don't really point to capital projects, right? So yeah, great question. Ask that question once more so I can type. I just like typing and forget you, Jackie. Ask the question once.
You want me to ask it again? I got another one. What was the other one? Oh, the contracting period. Like, so I see the contract executed potentially in April. Is there, what is the length? What are the parameters around the length of the contract period? Is it a year? Is it 2 years? Is it 3 years? Is there flexibility? Is it part of the proposal? Or some things out of the question?
Yeah, we expect it to be like maybe 8, maybe 9 months, but or maybe, yeah, around that amount of time. But the expected, sorry, I don't know if you want to go off mute, JP, but the expectation is that we hopefully get recommendations about how to move the money by late 2022, early 2023. But yeah, it all really depends on what that looks like for you.
Yeah. And Francesca, and we're normally, because if we're anticipating a 7-8 month process, and say we get the contract in place in May, that carries us in May of 2022, that carries us into 2023, right? And so we typically write a contract. So the contract would be from May of 2022 to December of 2023, right? Just to give us some, so we don't have to go back and amend, just in case there's some overruns or some unforeseen time challenges. Yeah, but we're gonna negotiate the contract for sure and those parameters. But like Manu said, we're anticipating 7 to 8 months.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. It looks like people are quieting down a little bit, which is fine. I want to add my contact information in the chat. I'm also going to share my screen again, if that's okay. But are there any lingering questions before I get back to the presentation? Again, please use me as a resource. And if I don't know the answer to anything, I'll definitely ask JP. But yeah, I'm here to try to answer as many questions as I can and make sure that folks have a pretty great application coming in our way. But yeah, really appreciate y'all being here. And not coming at me with pitchforks. This is surprising.
Well, thank you guys for having the information. I appreciate it. And it was nice meeting you as well, Mano. It was good seeing you, John.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, we're excited to hopefully be a part of this. And if I have any questions, we'll definitely reach out.
Yeah, and check the website. This will be on our website by Friday. So if you want to run back through it, Francesca and Michelle, I think Jane asked if she could get a transcript of the slide, of the slide presentation. This whole thing will be on our website, I think by Friday. Isn't that what Nona said? She's trying to get it by Friday?
Yeah, that's right.
And then if it's not up by Friday, then come with the pitchforks.
Okay.
Only in Mano's direction.
Or at
Mano's direction. Hey, Michelle, I can talk and I've been quiet, right? This is great, though. We really appreciate y'all.
Okay, well, thank y'all. Y'all have a good rest of your night.
All right. Good night, y'all.
Good night. I'm going to stop recording, Mano.
All right, great.